I've always believed that every family photo carries a hidden story behind those perfect smiles. Stories that nobody talks about, stories that never show up in the frame. Sometimes, when I look at old pictures of my own family, I remember little battles that happened just seconds before the camera clicked. Someone arguing with someone else, someone feeling left out, someone pretending to be okay. And today, the story I'm about to tell you, well, it's exactly the kind of moment most people wish they could crop out of their memory. But it's also the kind of moment that changes everything. It's about a woman named Lena, her husband Caleb, and a mother-in-law who believed she had the right to decide who belonged in a family, and who didn't. And trust me, once you hear what happened when the camera was ready and everyone was smiling, you'll never look at a family picture the same way again. Lena met Caleb 5 years before their wedding, and from the very beginning they were one of those couples who just clicked. Not in that dramatic movie way, but in the gentle, steady, I feel safe with you way. She was a nurse, always listening, always showing up for people in small, meaningful ways. And Caleb, he was a university professor who loved books more than arguments, a man who chose kindness even when kindness wasn't the easiest option. But there was one thing, one person they could never quite manage to navigate without stress. Marjorie, Caleb's mother. From the outside, Marjorie was everything a mother figure should be. Well-dressed, polite, active in community events, the type of woman who forced a smile in every conversation but made you feel like you should apologize for breathing wrong. She had opinions about everything, people's careers, people's clothes, people's choices, and she believed those opinions were facts. Lena tried her best. In the early days of dating, she went out of her way to impress Marjorie. She brought wine to family dinners, she laughed politely at the older woman's dry jokes. She complimented the decor of the house even though everything looked like it came straight out of an antique museum. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. If Lena wore a dress, it was too simple. If she wore makeup, it was too much. If she stayed quiet, she was shy. If she spoke up, she was trying to make everything about her. Marjorie had a talent for turning acceptance into a moving target. At first, Lena wondered if she was exaggerating things. She even blamed herself sometimes, thinking maybe she just wasn't the type of daughter-in-law Marjorie pictured for her perfect son. But then came a small moment that opened her eyes completely. It happened during their first Christmas together. The family tradition was to take a group photo in front of the decorated fireplace. Everyone wore matching sweaters, something Marjorie insisted on. And that year Lena was included. She stood next to Caleb, smiling nervously, trying to look natural. The photographer, a neighbor, took several pictures. Everyone laughed, everyone chatted, and later that night, Marjorie uploaded the photos on social media. Everyone appeared in the photo except Lena. She hadn't been cropped, she'd been erased, replaced by a pillow that wasn't even in the original shot. Lena stared at the edited photo in disbelief. Caleb confronted his mother, but Marjorie brushed it off as a technical mistake. Even though the editing job was so deliberate, it would have taken half an hour at least. After that, Lena started noticing other little things. At birthday events, Marjorie would call everyone for pictures but look at Lena and say, "You can relax if you want, dear." When friends came over to the house, she introduced family members enthusiastically. But when introducing Lena, she simply waved her hand and said, "This is Caleb's partner." Never girlfriend. Never future daughter-in-law. Just a vague, dismissive label that seemed to make Lena invisible. Still, Lena tried to keep the peace. She didn't want to push Caleb away from his family. She didn't want to be the reason for tension. She told herself that once they got married, maybe things would change. Maybe Marjorie would see the sincerity in her heart. Maybe acceptance would finally come. But acceptance was the last thing Marjorie had in mind. 2 weeks after the wedding, the family announced a big reunion at Marjorie's house. This time it was to take an official family portrait, the kind that gets printed, framed, and hung in the living room for decades. The kind of picture that becomes part of a family's legacy. Lena felt anxious, but she told herself that this would be an opportunity for things to finally settle. If she appeared in the official family photo, maybe it would mean she was finally seen, finally acknowledged, finally included. Caleb held her hand the entire drive, reassuring her. "We're married now," he said. "She has to accept it eventually." But even he didn't fully believe that. The house was buzzing with relatives when they arrived. Kids running around, adults laughing loudly, cousins gathering near the patio. Everyone seemed excited. And Marjorie? She greeted everyone warmly. Everyone except Lena. For Lena it was a ghost-like greeting. A forced smile. A barely audible hello dear. Still Lena stayed polite. She made small talk with a cousin, complimented the decorations, and did everything she could to avoid giving Marjorie any reason to complain. When the photographer arrived, Marjorie clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. All right, everyone. Let's get ready for the official portrait. People began positioning themselves near the large staircase in the living room. The perfect backdrop for a formal photo. Marjorie moved around like a director on a movie set. She placed the taller people in the back, the couples in the middle, the grandparents at the front. Lena stood next to Caleb, waiting for instructions, but Marjorie pretended she wasn't even there. Then came the moment everything shifted. Marjorie walked straight toward Lena, and without lowering her voice, without any attempt at subtlety, she said, "You can step aside. This photo is only for the family." Lena blinked. She thought she heard wrong. "Sorry," she whispered. Marjorie repeated, this time slower, as if speaking to someone who didn't understand simple instructions. "This photo is for the family." Lena froze. Her chest tightened. Her throat closed. Her face burned with humiliation so sudden and sharp it felt like a slap. People around them shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Some exchanged glances. But no one spoke. Lena's first instinct was to obey, to step away quietly, to avoid making a scene, and worst of all, to pretend it didn't hurt. She looked at Caleb, desperate for him to say something, anything. But Caleb was still half-turned, not fully aware yet of what was happening. Marjorie saw the hesitation and frowned. "Lena, please, don't make this difficult." And then she reached out her hand, her perfectly manicured fingers gently pushing Lena's arm, guiding her away from the group, like she was moving a piece of furniture. That's when Caleb finally saw it. All of it. The physical gesture. The humiliation. The way Lena was shrinking into herself. And something inside him snapped. He stepped to Lena's side so fast the photographer jerked his head up. "What's going on?" Caleb asked sharply. Marjorie folded her arms. "This photo is for the core family. She can join the others for the casual shots later." "Mom," Caleb said, voice low. "Lena is my wife." Marjorie didn't flinch. "That doesn't mean she needs to be in every picture." A ripple of shock moved through the relatives. The photographer lowered the camera. Silence filled the room. Even the children grew quiet as if they sensed something breaking. Lena's eyes stung with tears she desperately didn't want to shed in front of these people. Marjorie lifted her chin, trying to look authoritative. "Let's not ruin the moment," she said. "Lena, step out, please." And that's when Caleb finally said it. A sentence so sharp, so immediate, so full of conviction that it sliced through every whisper in the room. "If she's out," he said, "I'm out too." It wasn't a yell. It wasn't a dramatic outburst. It was calm. Deadly calm. The kind of calm that makes a room freeze. Marjorie blinked, genuinely thrown off. "Caleb, don't be ridiculous. This is the family portrait." "I know," he replied. "That's why my wife stays. Or we both leave." A few gasps echoed around. One of the uncles let out a quiet, "Oh boy." Marjorie looked around the room waiting for someone, anyone, to support her. But nobody opened their mouth. So she turned back to Caleb. "You're choosing her over your own family?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "I'm choosing respect. I'm choosing my marriage. And if you can't accept that, then we walk." Lena felt something warm bloom in her chest. A mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. Marjorie tried again to regain control. "Caleb, you're ruining everything." "No," he said. "You are." And then Caleb reached for Lena's hand. "Come on," he whispered to her. "We're leaving." Lena didn't trust her voice enough to speak, but she squeezed his hand, letting him know she was with him. Together they walked through the silent crowd, past the shocked relatives, past the stunned photographer, past Marjorie, whose face had drained of color. When the front door closed behind them, Lena finally allowed herself to breathe again. Really breathe. Tears spilled, but these were different. Not just hurt, not just humiliation. but also something else: being defended, chosen, protected. Caleb pulled her into his arms. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I should have stopped her sooner." Lena shook her head. "You did enough." But inside, she wondered if this was only the beginning. And she was right, because that moment, those few seconds in front of the camera, were about to ripple through the entire family in ways none of them could have predicted. Inside the house, chaos erupted. Relatives whispering, accusations flying, Marjorie pacing the living room like a caged animal whose power had finally been challenged. Caleb's younger sister, Mira, was the first to speak up. "You know, Mom, maybe you crossed a line." Marjorie snapped around. "A line? I was preserving the family image." Mira sighed. "At the cost of humiliating someone who's actually part of the family." "She's not," Marjorie started, then stopped, biting her lip, because even she knew how unreasonable she sounded. Meanwhile, outside, Caleb and Lena sat in the car in silence. Neither of them knew what came next. Neither of them knew that this family portrait, this stupid symbolic picture, was about to divide the household for months. But sometimes the smallest trigger reveals the biggest truth. And the truth was simple. Marjorie never saw Lena as family, but Caleb did. And he was no longer willing to let his mother decide who belonged in his life. Not anymore. Sometimes people think a family conflict ends the moment the argument stops. But the truth is, silence can be even louder than shouting. And in the days after the failed family portrait, that silence stretched across every corner of Caleb's family like a shadow no one wanted to acknowledge. Lena kept replaying the moment in her head, the hand on her arm, the command to step aside, the humiliating calmness in Marjorie's voice. But equally present in her memory was Caleb's voice cutting through everything. "If she's out, I'm out too." Whenever she thought about it, her chest filled with a strange mixture of pain and comfort. It hurt that the situation had escalated so far, but it meant everything that he chose her without hesitation. Still, tension lingered. 3 days after the incident, Caleb's phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls from his sister Mira, from an uncle, from a cousin, everyone wanting to talk, to gossip, to understand. But one person stayed quiet: Marjorie. And that quietness said a lot. Caleb ignored most calls, needing space, but eventually he answered Myra's. She didn't bother with greetings. "Cal," she said, voice low, "Mom is furious." Caleb sighed. "I figured. She's acting like the victim, telling everyone you disrespected her in her own house." Caleb laughed bitterly. "For defending my wife? You know how she is," Mira said. "She controls the narrative before anyone else can." "What about Dad?" Caleb asked. "He's Switzerland," she replied. Neutral, silent, pretending nothing happened. "You know how he gets when Mom's emotions take over." Caleb rubbed his forehead. "And the rest of the family?" "Divided," she admitted. "Some think Mom was wrong. Others think you overreacted." "And what do you think?" he asked. "I think," she said, "that someone should have put Mom in her place a long time ago." Caleb shut his eyes, letting the relief wash over him. "But," Mira continued, "you should prepare yourself. Mom wants to talk." Lena, overhearing from the kitchen, froze. A conversation with Marjorie was the last thing she wanted, but she knew it was inevitable. You can't heal a wound by pretending it didn't happen. That night, Caleb received a text. "We need to talk. Alone. Dinner tomorrow. Mom. Alone." It felt like an attack disguised as politeness. Caleb didn't reply immediately. He sat on the couch staring at the message. Lena approached quietly. "She wants you to go alone?" she asked gently. "Yes." Lena's heart trembled just a little, not because she didn't trust Caleb, but because she knew deep down that conversations like these were traps. Carefully set, emotionally manipulative traps. "You don't have to go," she whispered. Caleb shook his head. "I do. Not for her. For us. This won't go away unless I face it." Lena nodded, trying to keep her expression calm. But something in her eyes shimmered. A deep-rooted fear. Not of losing him, but of Marjorie hurting him emotionally the way she'd hurt her. Caleb cupped her cheek. "Lena, I'm not giving her an inch. I promise." She swallowed hard. "Just come back, okay?" The next evening, he drove to his mother's house. The same house where everything had happened. The same staircase. The same air thick with judgment. Marjorie greeted him with a stiff smile. "Caleb," she said. "Come in." He stepped inside, noticing the framed pictures on the wall. Pictures of vacations, holidays, achievements, and curiously, the space where the new family portrait was supposed to hang remained empty, almost as if it were waiting for something or someone. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Marjorie served the food as if performing a ritual, her movements precise and rehearsed. Finally, she sat down and folded her hands. "Caleb," she began, "I think we should address the situation." Caleb leaned back. "I agree." She inhaled deeply, preparing a speech she'd clearly been rehearsing in her head. "I understand that you are attached to Lena," she said carefully. "And I understand that newlyweds can be overly emotional." Caleb raised a hand. "Mom, stop. Don't talk about my wife like she's a phase." Marjorie stiffened. "I didn't mean it that way." "You did," Caleb said calmly. "But let's get to the point. Why did you try to remove her from the family photo?" Marjorie frowned, lifting her chin defensively. "I didn't try to remove her. I was organizing the photo. There's a tradition, a structure. Traditions aren't excuses for disrespect." Her lips tightened. "You humiliated her," Caleb continued. "In front of everyone. You pushed her. You spoke to her like she was nothing." "It wasn't personal," Marjorie insisted. "I was thinking of the family image." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. "Do you even hear yourself?" Marjorie exhaled sharply, as if she were the one being wronged. "You chose her," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and wounded pride. "You chose her over your own mother." Caleb didn't hesitate. "I chose what was right." "Right," she snapped. "She has changed you. You're cold, distant, blinded. You used to be close to me. And I still want to be," he said softly. "But not at the cost of my wife's dignity." Marjorie's eyes glistened with frustration. "What about my dignity? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You made me look like a villain." Caleb breathed slowly. "Mom, you did that to yourself." Silence fell. Heavy, uncomfortable, truth-filled. For the first time that night, something in Marjorie's expression shifted. A crack in the armor. The slightest flicker of uncertainty. But Marjorie was never one to concede easily. "I just don't think she fits into this family," she whispered. Caleb froze. His voice dropped to a cold, unwavering tone. "If you can't accept her," he said, "then you don't accept me." He stood up. "Either she's part of this family, or I'm not." Marjorie's face drained of color. "You wouldn't mean that," she whispered, desperate. "I do," he replied. "I meant every word." He walked toward the door. Marjorie rose quickly. "Caleb, wait." He paused but didn't turn around. I need time," she admitted quietly, her voice cracking like thin ice. "I'm not ready. I don't know how to handle this. She's different." Caleb finally turned to face her. "She's good," he said. "She's patient. She's kind. She's tried over and over. But you keep shutting her out." Marjorie's hands trembled. "I'm afraid," she whispered. Caleb blinked. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of losing you," she said, voice breaking. "You're my son. My only son." Caleb softened, but only slightly. "You won't lose me. Unless you push me away yourself." Tears gathered in her eyes. Real tears. Rare tears. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed. "I don't know how to share you." Caleb walked closer, speaking gently now. "You're not sharing me. You're gaining someone. But only if you let yourself." Marjorie covered her face with her hands. And for the first time she looked small. Not intimidating. Not controlling. Just human. A woman trapped inside her own fears. "I need time," she said again. "Take it," Caleb replied. "But understand this. Disrespecting my wife will never be acceptable. Not now. Not ever." He left without another word. When he returned home, Lena was waiting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, eyes tired from worry. The moment he walked in, she stood up. "How did it go?" Caleb exhaled heavily. "Messy. Complicated. But something cracked. She's not ready to apologize." But she's not fighting just to fight anymore. Lena sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." He kissed her forehead. "Always." Days passed, then weeks. The silence continued, but it wasn't hostile anymore. It was reflective. Then out of nowhere a text arrived. From Marjorie. "I'd like to talk. Both of you. At the park. Public. Neutral. Just talk." Lena's stomach twisted. Caleb held her hand. "We'll go together," he said. They met at a quiet park near a lake. Marjorie arrived wearing a soft-colored blouse instead of her perfectly pressed business attire. Her posture looked smaller, more fragile. She approached slowly. "Thank you for coming," she said. Lena nodded politely. "Of course." There was a painful pause. Then Marjorie inhaled deeply. "I owe you both an apology." The words felt surreal. "I behaved terribly," she continued. "What I did at the photo, it was cruel. And it was wrong. I was trying to control something I had no right to control. And I hurt you, Lena. Deeply." Lena's throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered. "You did." Marjorie nodded, accepting the truth rather than defending herself. "I can't promise I'll be perfect," she admitted. "I've been set in my ways for too long. But I can promise that I'm willing to try. If you're willing to let me." Caleb looked at Lena gently, letting her decide. Lena took a breath. "I'm willing," she said softly. "But respect has to be the foundation. For both of us." Marjorie nodded again. "I understand." It wasn't a magical reconciliation. No sudden hugs. No dramatic tears. But it was real. Honest. And for the first time, Marjorie truly saw Lena. Not as a threat, not as an outsider, but as someone who loved her son with her whole heart. Weeks later, the family gathered again. This time for a casual afternoon barbecue. Nothing formal. Nothing staged. But at one point, Marjorie approached the photographer cousin and said, "Could you take a picture of all of us? Including Lena?" When everyone assembled on the lawn, Marjorie did something unexpected. She gently guided Lena to stand beside her. And when the camera clicked, the smiles weren't forced. Not perfect, but real. Later, Marjorie placed that photo in the empty space on her wall. A symbol. A beginning. A quiet acknowledgement that family isn't about control. It's about choice. And this time she chose inclusion. In life, people often say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but sometimes it's worth even more. It can hold an entire turning point, a silent agreement, a promise to grow. That photo on Marjorie's wall wasn't proof that everything had been fixed. It was proof that things were finally moving in the right direction. Lena and Caleb knew there would still be mistakes, awkward moments, and slow steps. But they also knew they weren't alone in the effort anymore. And as they walked out of the house that day, hand in hand, they felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope.